Hold on, because this story takes a wild turn. I met Bernie years ago when I used to host a golf tournament down in Bermuda, and Bernie was easily the standout star of the entire comedy event. Unlike me, Bernie could let things slide, while I might stay irritated about something for years. People used to look at Marjorie Harvey sitting quietly on the sidelines and laugh it off. Then suddenly, you'd spot her on HBO or somewhere else and think to yourself, wait a minute, wasn't that supposed to be mine? The problem was nobody was going to believe you anyway. For years, she was simply known as the woman standing beside one of the biggest names in entertainment. But now, old allegations, personal accusations, and resurfaced stories have people examining her alleged role behind the curtain far more closely. Critics and former insiders claim the public may have only seen part of the picture. Some believe Marjorie Harvey wasn't just present during major moments in Steve Harvey's career and personal life. According to various allegations, she may have influenced relationships, business decisions, and family dynamics that later became major sources of controversy. That brings us to Samuel L. Jackson and Katt Williams, whose names have both surfaced in conversations surrounding these claims. Suddenly, this isn't just a story about Steve Harvey anymore. It's about whether Marjorie Harvey held more influence behind the scenes than anyone realized. According to these allegations, she wasn't merely watching events unfold. Some critics claim she actively shaped outcomes that affected careers, friendships, and even family relationships. One of the most discussed accusations involves Steve's late friend and comedy legend Bernie Mac. According to claims that have recently resurfaced online, Steve allegedly worked against Bernie during important moments in his career. Those accusations sparked intense debate because Steve publicly mourned Bernie after his passing and has consistently spoken respectfully about him over the years. The story becomes even more controversial when some people suggest outside influences may have contributed to that reported tension. If any of these allegations are true, they raise serious questions about what was really happening behind the scenes during the Kings of Comedy era and whether the public ever received the full story. Meanwhile, separate allegations from Steve's ex-wife, Mary, have fueled even more speculation involving family disputes, loyalty conflicts, and disagreements over money. Bernie Mac always said he walked alone, but some people believe he never truly did. They believe he walked with faith every step of the way. Discussions surrounding Marjorie Harvey's past relationships continue to keep these stories alive, and it's easy to understand why they still generate so much attention today. What makes the situation even more surprising is that Bernie Mac didn't stay silent about the tension. Long before many of these discussions resurfaced online, Bernie openly addressed his issues with Steve Harvey during a high-profile interview. Those comments have since become a major talking point whenever people revisit the complicated history between the two comedy icons. Back in 2003, Bernie sat down with GQ magazine and spoke candidly about what he believed was happening behind the scenes. According to the article, Bernie claimed that Steve was jealous of his success and had allegedly tried to position himself for opportunities that were supposedly meant for Bernie. During the Kings of Comedy era, Steve Harvey was originally placed as the headliner because, at the time, he was the biggest and most recognizable name. However, critics later argued that audiences responded more strongly to D.L. Hughley and Bernie Mac, leading organizers to shift Steve into the host role. Then came even harsher commentary. Some critics claimed that despite questions about his talent, Steve always managed to land on his feet. In their view, his success wasn't about comedy skills alone, but about knowing exactly how to navigate the business. Those opinions became even more controversial when critics accused Steve of building relationships with powerful people to advance his career. One of the biggest examples often mentioned involved the blockbuster film Ocean's 11. According to reports, someone associated with Steve's team allegedly contacted director Steven Soderbergh and attempted to convince him to consider Steve for the role instead. When GQ asked Bernie Mac how he reacted after hearing about the situation, his response was surprisingly calm. "The Hollywood game we're in is a cold game," he said. Rather than turning the situation into a public war, Bernie seemed to view it as another example of the ruthless competition that exists throughout the entertainment industry. What stood out even more was Bernie's perspective on power, influence, and ambition in Hollywood. He suggested that many people become trapped by industry politics, personal rivalries, and endless competition. Instead of chasing revenge, Bernie explained why he chose a different approach. As he put it, when people told him about the situation, his reaction was simple: "What could I do?" Those words continued to resonate with fans who believe they perfectly reflected how Bernie handled conflict throughout his career. Bernie made it clear that he had no desire to transform the situation into a public feud. During the same interview, he emphasized that his focus was making audiences laugh, not exchanging insults. As Bernie explained, "I'm not going to sling mud. I'm not a rapper. I tell jokes. I try to make people laugh. I'm not going to sling mud. Steve and anybody else can say whatever they want. Ain't nobody got control over me. I have the control." Even with that mindset, Bernie didn't completely hold back when discussing what he believed was Steve's personality and approach to success. Looking back on the Kings of Comedy years, Bernie referenced moments that clearly stayed with him. He encouraged people to revisit the recordings and pay attention to the dynamics on display. According to Bernie, whenever Steve introduced Cedric the Entertainer, the attention somehow circled back to Steve himself. Bernie then added, "Yeah, I knew about it. Did it make me mad? Nah. You can't make me mad. You ain't that good." Those comments fueled years of speculation about what was really happening between the two comedians away from the spotlight. At the same time, Bernie suggested experiences like these changed the way he viewed Hollywood altogether. According to his comments, he became increasingly frustrated with the competition, politics, and relentless pursuit of fame surrounding the industry. Eventually, Bernie decided to focus more on the life he had built away from cameras and celebrity culture. Reflecting on that choice, he told GQ, "There wasn't anything for me out there." Then, speaking about his family, he added, "I had the best ride right here at home." Years later, when Steve Harvey was asked about Bernie's remarks, he strongly rejected the allegations. In interviews following Bernie's passing, Steve denied the claims and expressed frustration that those statements had become public, setting the stage for yet another explosive chapter in a controversy that refused to disappear. A controversy that, somehow, is still fueling debates all these years later. As discussions surrounding Bernie Mac's comments refused to die down, Steve Harvey eventually decided to address the entire situation himself during a televised interview. By then, the story had already been making the rounds for years, with fans still wondering what really happened between two of the most recognizable comedians of their generation. Instead of fading into history, the feud seemed to reappear every time an old interview, article, or headline resurfaced online. During his conversation with Ed Gordon, Steve was asked directly about Bernie's allegations, including claims that he had attempted to take movie opportunities away from him. Steve firmly denied those accusations, saying, "I was upset at first because it just wasn't true. Me and Bernie had a lot of good times together, and then this article in GQ came out and put all this vicious stuff in there." According to Steve, the published story didn't accurately represent the reality of their friendship or working relationship, but not everyone was convinced. Critics of Steve's version of events quickly pointed out that the GQ article included direct quotes attributed to Bernie Mac himself. Because of that, some observers questioned whether the controversy could really be blamed on the magazine's presentation alone. Those lingering doubts helped keep the debate alive long after both men had publicly shared their sides of the story. Then, just when things couldn't get any messier, comedian Corey Holcomb, who had previously worked alongside Bernie, entered the conversation with opinions of his own. Holcomb argued that Bernie Mac and Cedric the Entertainer were stronger performers and suggested that Steve's rise to certain opportunities came through building relationships with powerful figures in the entertainment industry. Those comments reflected Holcomb's personal perspective, but they added yet another layer to a controversy already overflowing with competing narratives, conflicting recollections, and years of accusations about what was really happening behind the scenes during one of comedy's most successful eras. As more people revisited the long-running disputes surrounding Steve Harvey, the conversation began expanding far beyond Bernie Mac. Suddenly, comments from other people who had crossed paths with Steve throughout his career started resurfacing as well. What began as a discussion about professional rivalry slowly evolved into a much larger debate about reputation, loyalty, influence, and the relationships that may have shaped major decisions behind closed doors. One name that frequently surfaced in those conversations was Corey Holcomb, who has publicly criticized Steve on multiple occasions. Holcomb has repeatedly argued that Steve benefited from industry relationships and opportunities that, in his opinion, should have gone to other entertainers. While those remain Holcomb's personal views, they have continued fueling ongoing debates about Steve's rise within the entertainment business. Another notable voice came from Cathy Hughes, founder of Radio One, the company that helped launch Steve's nationally syndicated radio platform. Hughes publicly expressed disappointment with Steve and described him in highly unfavorable terms, suggesting their professional relationship did not end on particularly good terms. Her remarks added another high-profile name to the growing list of critics who have questioned aspects of Steve Harvey's conduct throughout his career, pushing an already controversial story into even murkier territory. Then the story takes another dramatic turn when Samuel L. Jackson's name suddenly enters the conversation. Samuel shared a close friendship with Bernie Mac and even spoke at his funeral, a fact that has fueled endless speculation among commentators about what he may have thought regarding the reported tension between Bernie and Steve Harvey. Over the years, rumors and unverified claims have circulated suggesting that Samuel believed Marjorie Harvey held considerable influence over certain decisions in Steve's personal and professional life. However, it's important to note that these claims remain allegations and have never been publicly confirmed by Samuel L. Jackson himself. Supporters of that theory often point to Samuel's own marriage as a striking contrast. He and LaTanya Richardson Jackson built their relationship long before fame, fortune, and Hollywood success entered the picture. Meanwhile, separate allegations from Steve Harvey's ex-wife, Mary, continued adding fuel to the controversy. In emotional public statements, Mary claimed that Steve turned her son Winton against her, forced her out of their home, and left her devastated during the fallout of their divorce. She further alleged that he manipulated situations surrounding legal proceedings and claimed sole credit for building his success. According to Mary, she sat through much of the process heartbroken and overwhelmed by everything that was unfolding around her. As for Samuel and LaTanya Richardson Jackson, their story followed a very different path. The two met while attending college in Atlanta and remained together through decades of challenges, career changes, personal struggles, and eventual Hollywood success. Because of that history, some observers believe Samuel has always valued relationships rooted in loyalty, commitment, and shared experiences rather than celebrity status or public image. That belief is one reason his name continues resurfacing whenever discussions involving Steve and Marjorie Harvey return to public attention. When fans compare the personal lives of these entertainers, one theme repeatedly emerges: loyalty before fame. For many observers, the years before success arrived matter just as much as everything that came afterward. Those early years are often viewed as the true test of who remained supportive when there were no red carpets, multi-million-dollar contracts, television deals, or Hollywood opportunities waiting around the corner. Supporters of Samuel L. Jackson frequently point to his decades-long marriage to LaTanya Richardson Jackson as a powerful example of that kind of commitment. Their relationship began long before Samuel became one of the biggest stars in the world, and they stayed together through every stage of his journey. To many fans, that history speaks for itself. Bernie Mac is often included in the same conversation. He married his high school sweetheart, Rhonda Gore, in 1977, years before becoming a household name. During the difficult years when Bernie was struggling to establish himself as a stand-up comedian, Rhonda remained firmly by his side. Their marriage lasted more than 3 decades and continued until Bernie's passing in 2008. Fans frequently point to their relationship as one of the strongest examples of lasting commitment in the entertainment industry. Critics of Steve Harvey, however, often present a very different narrative. They point to his relationship history and argue that his path unfolded differently from those of Samuel and Bernie. According to widely discussed accounts, Steve first met Marjorie Harvey in 1990 at a comedy club, a moment that would later become one of the most talked about chapters in his personal story. That first meeting eventually became the foundation of a story that has been told over and over again. According to widely repeated accounts, Steve immediately felt there was something different about Marjorie Harvey and even hinted that she would play an important role in his future. Over time, that moment became a central piece of the timeline surrounding one of the most talked about relationships in entertainment. But once people started digging deeper into the timeline, the story began looking far more complicated than the polished fairy tale many fans had heard for years. What is often presented as a romantic story of fate, destiny, and second chances has also been surrounded by criticism, debate, and conflicting accounts from individuals connected to Steve Harvey's past. Depending on whose version of events you hear, the relationship can appear very different from the carefully crafted public image that later emerged. One detail critics frequently highlight is that Steve was reportedly still married to his first wife, Marcia Harvey, when he first met Marjorie Harvey in 1990. That fact alone has fueled years of discussion about exactly when certain relationships began and how events unfolded behind the scenes. According to various publicly discussed accounts, Steve and Marjorie eventually went their separate ways for a period while Steve continued trying to establish himself in comedy. During those years, Steve and Marcia Harvey were raising their family together and welcomed 3 children, twin daughters Brandy and Carly, along with their son Broderick Harvey Jr. Later, Marcia made several allegations regarding the breakdown of their marriage. Among those claims were accusations that Steve had relationships with other women and that their marriage ended during an especially difficult chapter of her life. Those allegations have been discussed publicly for years, although they remain part of a disputed personal history. Following the divorce, financial disagreements reportedly became another source of tension. Public records and interviews from that period reference legal disputes involving support payments and other financial obligations. Around the same time, Steve's relationship with Mary Shackelford, who would later become his second wife, reportedly became more serious. Years later, Mary would make her own public allegations involving Steve, Marjorie Harvey, and events she claimed occurred behind closed doors, adding yet another layer to an already controversial narrative. As the controversy continued growing, Mary Shackelford became one of the most outspoken voices discussing what she believed happened behind the scenes. Through interviews and public statements, Mary shared her perspective on Steve Harvey's relationship with Marjorie Harvey, making numerous allegations that continued generating debate years later. Among Mary's claims was the belief that Marjorie's arrival significantly changed the dynamics within Steve's family. According to Mary, tensions surrounding family relationships and priorities increased after Steve and Marjorie reconnected. Mary also alleged that Steve became increasingly focused on building a future with Marjorie and her family. In her version of events, some existing relationships were affected by those changes. However, these claims represent Mary's perspective and have been disputed by others connected to the situation. The timeline most often referenced by critics centers on the period when Steve Harvey's career was beginning to gain significant momentum. As his profile continued rising and new opportunities appeared, questions surrounding those personal relationships became an increasingly controversial part of a story that still sparks debate today. By that point, Steve Harvey was no longer viewed as an up-and-coming stand-up comedian. He had already transformed into a recognizable television personality with growing influence in the entertainment industry. Around that same period, Steve and Marjorie Harvey reconnected after years apart, setting the stage for a relationship that would eventually become one of the most talked-about partnerships in show business. However, there was one detail critics never stopped bringing up. Steve was still married to Mary Shackelford at the time, and the collapse of that marriage quickly became a subject of intense public scrutiny. Mary has repeatedly claimed that she played a crucial role in supporting Steve during key stages of his career while also contributing to various business ventures. Following their separation, she openly expressed frustration over how the relationship ended and the decisions that followed. In 2007, Steve married Marjorie Harvey and later embraced a blended family that included her children, Morgan, Jason, and Lori Harvey. Supporters often describe that period as the beginning of a positive new chapter. Critics, however, have continued questioning how those transitions unfolded, keeping the controversy alive long after the events themselves occurred. As public disputes surrounding Steve Harvey's personal life continued making headlines, some of the most serious allegations came directly from Mary Shackelford. Years after their marriage ended, Mary spoke publicly about the breakup and the custody disputes that followed. Her statements generated significant attention because they involved not only Steve and Marjorie Harvey, but also broader questions involving family relationships, influence, loyalty, and power. According to Mary, the transition from her marriage to Steve's relationship with Marjorie happened so quickly that she felt pushed aside after years of helping support Steve during critical moments in his rise to fame. She also alleged that her relationship with her son, Winton Harvey, suffered as a result of the divorce. Mary further claimed that Steve's financial resources, public influence, and celebrity status provided advantages during legal proceedings. While these allegations have circulated widely online, they remain Mary's account of events and continue to be debated. Mary also suggested that Marjorie Harvey played a significant role behind the scenes throughout that period. According to her version of events, Marjorie encouraged decisions that increased tensions within the family and influenced how certain relationships evolved after the divorce. Those claims have never been conclusively proven, but they continue resurfacing whenever discussions about the Harvey family's history return to public attention. Some commentators have also pointed to the timing of other events taking place during the same years. Critics have noted that Steve's friendship with Bernie Mac reportedly deteriorated around the time he reunited with Marjorie. As a result, some insiders began speculating that multiple personal and professional conflicts may have been connected. However, no public evidence has ever confirmed such a link, leaving that theory firmly in the realm of speculation. Then, the controversy takes another turn when people bring up comments made by Katt Williams during interviews discussing Hollywood and the entertainment industry. Katt has often argued that success in certain circles comes with pressures, expectations, and behind-the-scenes realities that the public rarely gets to see. Because of those remarks, some critics have attempted to connect his broader observations to Steve Harvey's personal story. Others argue that those conclusions rely more on assumptions than verified facts. What remains undeniable is that the combination of family disputes, career rivalries, and long-running allegations has kept these conversations alive for years. At the end of the day, many of these stories originate from interviews, public statements, personal accounts, and claims that remain heavily disputed. While some people believe Marjorie Harvey played a major role in key events throughout Steve Harvey's life, others maintain that Steve alone should be held responsible for his choices and actions. And that's exactly why this story refuses to fade away. The allegations, denials, timelines, and competing narratives continue creating a controversy that sparks debate years after the events themselves took place. Then there's the larger discussion surrounding Katt Williams' comments about how Hollywood really operates behind closed doors. Some viewers believe his observations explain patterns they've noticed for years, while others believe people are connecting dots that simply don't belong together. No matter where you stand, this topic continues generating strong reactions every time it resurfaces. Now it's your turn. After hearing all these claims, accusations, and perspectives, what do you think